Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Hire. On Beyond the Hire, we dive into recruiting for the go-to-market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. Today, we are joined by Justin Liu. He is the CEO and co-founder of Charta Health, an AI chart review platform, transforming how healthcare organizations audit patient charts and documentation at scale. Charta streamlines critical workflows across revenue cycle, clinical operations, and compliance functions, helping providers and payers operate more efficiently and deliver better patient care. Backed by Bain Capital Ventures, Charta is on a mission to make every healthcare dollar accountable and every chart accurate, simplifying the complexities of non-clinical operations from the ground up. Before founding Charta, Justin led growth at Rockset, acquired by OpenAI, and worked on Google's cloud security team. His background in scaling cutting edge AI technology is central to Charta's success in transforming healthcare infrastructure. That is a mouthful, but thank you so much and welcome, Justin, to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I do this all the time. Did I pronounce your last name correctly? Because I forgot to ask ahead of time.
It's a good question. It's Liu, so pretty close, but I've gotten all kinds of flavors from it.
Got it wrong. What's like the worst one that you've gotten?
I don't know. It doesn't get that fancy. I think people just generally just maybe say Lou or Lee, but there's only 3 letters. You can't really go wrong with it.
That is true. Although I feel like sometimes people get real creative, even with just 3 letters. So I always love hearing it, whatever they come up with. My married last name is Meyer, and we've gotten everything from Major to Majer to Mir. Like literally, like you think it can't get weirder, but it always can. And whenever they page Mr. Major, I kind of love it because that's so much better than Meyer, to be honest. I'll be Mrs. Major. That's a pretty cool name. We have a lot to cover here because you have a very exciting career. So before we jump into Charta, because we love Charta here at Bets, I want to hear about kind of how you started your career and what led you to Charta. So what did you do when you studied at university? What was your focus or your major? And then your first job after school?
Maybe I'll even take it one step back from there just to even set the stage further. I think I am almost by the script, kind of a Bay Area kid. Spent my whole life here. Both my parents worked in tech here my whole life. Went to school at Berkeley, just across the bay. I grew up about an hour south of San Francisco in a small town called Saratoga. Went to school at Berkeley, about an hour north, and then I studied computer science and business. And so mainly indexing on the technical computer science front. And my first job out of college, you mentioned this earlier, was working as an engineer at Google. So again, totally followed the script here. I was a boring software engineer. And then, before making my way into the startup world.
Wait, that's so cool. So your parents worked in tech. Were they also software engineers or did they do something completely different?
That's right. They were both software engineers. Yeah. Classic kind of Asian immigrant parents. They both studied computer science and moved to the Bay Area for kind of one of those early dot-com boom days.
Wow.
Tech startups, right when things were blowing up.
Wow, that's really cool. I don't think we've gotten that on the podcast yet, that the parents were also in tech. That's really, really cool. And I'm very jealous because I don't think I realized when I was little that that was an option even to move into that field. So the fact that you had your parents to look up to already, that's amazing. And the fact that they were part of that dot-com boom, that's amazing. Can you share what companies they worked at?
Well, my mom, I think today works at IBM still. They worked at like a startup. I think it was called Zapfire or something. It was like a Kleiner Perkins startup. I'm pretty sure they blew up like a lot of the companies did in 2000. They've worked on a couple of since. But yeah, no, it's funny you say that though. And it wasn't just my parents. Almost everybody I grew up around, all my friends at school, their parents, everybody was a software engineer. A
No
lot of
way.
Asian immigrant parents. Yeah, I know. And it was very, very academic oriented kind of Bay Area vibes where like being cool was being good at math, which is quite rare I hear these days.
I mean, I think that's still very cool. I feel like the social network kind of made that really cool, right? With the whole Facebook thing. Now everyone's like, who's really good at math? You know, they're going to be going places. That's absolutely incredible and really exciting. I'm actually curious. Did your parents work at the same company for a long time? You know, I know like previous generations, they tend to start a job at a company and the goal was to stay at that company their entire career. Is that something in the Bay Area that your parents already did or was that different?
That's funny. I've talked to a lot of people for a lot of things, and nobody has ever dug into this part of my past before. So I think the answer is yes, and then they learn their lessons and stop doing that. So I think they both their first jobs out of grad school were both working at AT&T, which at the time was the biggest tech company, like really the only major one. Before I think they even got split up for being a monopoly. So they were both at AT&T, and then they both left AT&T from the East Coast actually. So I was actually born in New Jersey, and they were both working
Oh.
at AT&T there. I was super young when this happened, but they both got an early job at this tech startup in the Bay Area. This, I think it was a Kleiner Perkins startup. They both got hired and left AT&T to join the startup and moved to California in the Bay Area to be in tech. Yeah, I actually don't even know all the details. So this is probably, you can probably find more about where this is all fake news online. But what I was told was there were many opportunities. They could have sold for several $billion. They turned down those offers. Ultimately, it all blew up. And I think like with the rest of the dot-com boom, and I don't know if they got anything out of it. And so they regretted that. So much so, I think they're like, okay, we're never going to work together at the same company again. And so I believe since they've worked at kind of different various mid to large size tech companies. But yeah, that was kind of their background.
That's really interesting. Kind of one of the reasons I ask is because something that comes up a lot in the world of recruitment, right, is within the world of tech, there's a lot of job hopping. And I'm actually very curious on your opinion as a CEO about that. And my parents' generation, I'm going to just make the assumptions that my parents are slightly older than than your parents. People stayed at the same company. They don't work in tech. They're also in Europe. I'm from the Netherlands. But you stayed at the same company for your entire career. My mom worked at KLM as a flight attendant for 40 years. My
Wow.
father, he has his own business, but people have worked with him for decades, right? That's just something that was normal and also more normal, I would say, in different industries outside of, the world of technology. I'm very curious kind of your viewpoint growing up in the Bay Area and doing what you do on people staying at one company their entire career versus job hopping.
Well, I honestly think a lot of it comes down to privilege of how good the job market is and how easy is it for you to find another job. And do you feel, are you more in the position of like, I want to hold down this job and I don't want to get let go? Are you so lucky and privileged to be in a place where you can look for a job, maybe for your own career ambitions or growth, or you want to be a part of something, even take chances? I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. And so my parents, they were both probably similar in a sense to what you mentioned with your parents, because they both grew up in what I understand to be, at least when they were young, communist China. Everybody was on food stamps. Like when they kind of opened up the government and they came here, they were very, very poor. They had like cash, a small amount, just like sewn into their jackets. That's how they survived. And so they were, I'm sure, extremely lucky and happy to join like a really big company at the time, like AT&T. It was, on all accounts, like I guess I followed a similar script here, but like joining a really, really big tech company was kind of like a dream job, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I think they had that mentality for a while. They ultimately took a chance and joined a startup, which maybe because it didn't work out. I think they've mostly worked at bigger tech companies since. But yeah, for the most part, my parents were certainly, I think, much more conservative on a scale than I got to grow up and be. But yeah, I think growing up in the Bay Area, though, so many tech entrepreneurs, and it's very normalized and glorified of like, hey, this is everybody and every other person's family or parent or family member. Somebody's tried this. So yeah, so I think, I don't know. And the job market's changing again today, but I feel like for the last 1 or 2 decades, really, I think we've all known being like an engineer, software engineer in like a big tech company was the best thing ever. You got to work whatever hours you wanted. You got to be paid way too much money. And like
Yeah.
every company was fighting for you. And so kind of a different world.
Yeah. So when you see people now, if you see CVs coming across your desk, does it bother you at all when you're like 1 stint here, 1 year stint here, 1 year there? Or you're like, no, I get the job market. I get what they're doing. And I respect the hustle.
It certainly makes a difference. And I think I'm learning this more as I go here. So I assume you guys are more experts than I am. But one, it certainly does make a difference. Of course, I didn't invent this, but like the ideal thing you'd want to see is a meaningful run, we usually call it, which is typically like a 2 to 4 year run at least, depending on the role, where you'd ideally like to see anywhere from like 1 to 3 promotions, depending on the role. That tells us that you really succeeded, you weren't struggling through it. And because outside of all the limited signals we can get inside an interview process, and in most cases, we can't get a back channel on you. That's one huge proof point. If we can see somebody, especially at a company that we know was very competitive, I saw a lot of growth. If you made it through for a meaningful number of years and got promoted several times, that means you did a good job. Your team must have thought you were doing a good job. And so I do think that means something. Certainly stints that are even near a year, but certainly if it's under a year, I think are much riskier. I think especially for early stage startup like us, it's harder to take risks because
Yeah.
we don't know what the reasons were. And many people have great reasons, of course, for leaving their jobs, but what they'll tell us in an interview room, it's really hard for us to figure out what the real reasons were. I'd be lying if I said like it doesn't affect our screening process. It certainly makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I saw that even before starting Charta, you'd been at companies like Google for 4 years, so you definitely kind of followed that as well as in staying for a meaningful period of time. Why did you decide to kind of become an entrepreneur? Was that like a decision you made? You're like, what is the idea that I'm going to go after? Or did the idea find you and then you went, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to do this?
So this one, I think, I feel like it's more popularized these days, but I was definitely in the former bucket here of, I think, especially as a Bay Area kid. And it's funny, I didn't know my co-founder growing up, but we had very similar stories just growing up in the Bay Area. All of our friends and families worked in tech, a lot of entrepreneurs, in our families and our friends alike. And so I think it's one of those things where like I'd kind of known for a long time that it felt like I had to try this thing at some point. I felt like I had to give it a shot. And we'd seen a lot of people try and fail, and by no means was it going to be easy. And by no means you're going to succeed, and we still don't. But I think it's just one of the things growing up the Bay here. It's so normalized. It feels like gonna have to try this thing at some point. It feels like it's part of the script. It's part of what you optimize for, and people take their swing at it. And so I've known for a long time, I think that this is something I wanted to try, but had no idea exactly what I'd build my company around one day, which, depending on who you ask, but really for most people, I think it's the worst reason possible to start a company. Especially, I think, even more ironic that as a healthcare founder now,
Yeah.
most healthcare founders have really good stories. So many of them, right? I mean, I think like there's and very real stories, often like a personal healthcare experience with like a grandparent or family member or yourself, or at least you have family members in healthcare or close friends who can give you some insight into the world of healthcare and how broken or painful the different parts of the healthcare system can be. But yeah, the honest truth is actually both my co-founder and I, none of that was true for us. We almost in a very shielded bubble way, no personal experience that was what got us here, no kind of like friends or family that even worked in healthcare. We have no family members that work as nurses, doctors, even healthcare founders, no real
No
relationship
way.
with the healthcare industry. And so, yeah, our path into finding healthcare was extremely organic and certainly not premeditated.
Wait, so how did it happen? How did Charter come into the world?
So, my co-founder here, his name is Scott, so I'll reference him as Scott here. So Scott and I, when we started the company together, we both, as I mentioned, had no idea what company we were going to build, and both knew that we wanted to start a company. And we knew not only from having grown up around so many people who had tried and failed, and seeing our families go through similar journeys, but even I think even more so, we had spent the last handful of years at Rockset, this AI infrastructure startup that, yeah, was ultimately very lucky to become OpenAI's first product acquisition. But we're very early there, way before revenue was around. And we saw the company struggle and fight really hard to find product market fit and go through all the hard stages of the company. And if nothing else, I think coming out of that, we knew starting a company was going to be really, really, really hard. And especially, I think finding product market fit for a brand new company is one of the hardest things in the world to get. And so we really wanted to find an idea that we truly believed had a real path to being a venture scale company. And that meant validating, I think, a lot of things. I think there's certainly the company building front. You, of course, is the first most thing you think about. You want to make sure you're solving a really big problem that actually has a huge market and that you have the right product to fit that need. You want to make sure that there's a large enough market and not only that it's there, but you have some distribution mechanism to actually sell into that market and get people to take a chance on you, even if the need is theoretically there. And that's probably a huge part of it. And then the other part of this is, us, I think, especially as first time founders in the venture world, really, I think we wanted to find a space that we could really see ourselves working on for a long time. And the people we interact with on a daily basis, especially in a vertical like healthcare and other verticals we explored, those are the people we're going to have to interact and deal with every day, the same people who we end up working with, who are passionate about these kinds of problems. So I think we really went on a long discovery journey ourselves and ultimately spent over a year and a half in stealth
Oh, wow.
trying a lot of different ideas. We spent maybe the first half of 2023 just doing like a huge blitz through different industries. So we had this pretty hilarious motion actually. Like we basically had put together this big cold emailing engine to try and interview people about their jobs and learn more. And so our motion was literally blasting these C-suite executives with these emails that offered them $100 gift cards to jump on Zoom with us for 30 minutes. And not a super high hit rate, but we did that like hundreds of thousands of emails we sent out. We bought out even more web domains to create more email accounts so you could send more emails without them going to spam. We just wanted to talk to more people. And
But how many people ended up taking you up on the offer and sitting down with you?
probably a couple hundred, yeah, maybe three or 400 people. I mean, yeah, not a super high hit rate, but you blast out enough emails and over the course, you do this every day as your full-time job for a number of months. It's not as hard as sales where, we're offering people a gift card to just take a chat with us.
To be fair, I think that's exactly what sales is.
That's true.
The amount of times I've been offered a $100 gift card just to sit down
Yeah,
and talk with someone, I feel like you kind of got exactly what sales is.
totally,
That's
totally.
incredible.
Yeah, and that's the journey we went on. So about half a year exploring like 15 to 20 different industries, blasting these poor C-suite executives with our really awful emails. And then about halfway through the year, kind of figured out that we wanted to build in healthcare as an industry, but still had no idea what we were going to do inside healthcare. And then spent another whole year from the middle of 2023 to the middle of last year trying almost every single AI health tech idea in the world. We were brand new to the space. We knew the whole setup, I think, was kind of a recipe for disaster, like two young engineers with no healthcare background coming in and trying to build in a world where we're trying to convince oftentimes like older white men who are very, very well versed in the industry to pay us hundreds of thousands of dollars for a piece of software that we had no business doing with them. And so, yeah, it was a huge challenge. And so, because of that, we tried to take our time to really understand the industry. We both got certified, for example, as professional medical coders and
Oh, wow.
just tried to work as people in the space and understand a little bit more about the industry before ultimately committing to an idea. So yeah, really organic path. No single kind of huge aha moment that many founders have during their ideation journey.
That is incredible. I've said this on the podcast before, and I think a lot of people one day want to start a company, but doing it, you're waiting for that idea to hit you. And the fact that you guys, I mean, I'm sure it's, such a huge part of because of where you grew up and how you grew up. Just for like, we're gonna do this, we're just gonna sit here and come up with an idea together and give ourselves time to do it and not rush ourselves is absolutely incredible. And then coming up with Charta is, I mean, that's amazing. That's a really good story. Are you still in touch with any of these executives that you gave $100 gift cards to?
Well, I think the ones that we ended up working with in healthcare, some of them became advisors for us. Some of them have just been friends cheering us on the journey. Some of those executives became our early design partners that ended up becoming our first clients. And so I do think there's some of those people we still kept in touch, but no, for the most part, we were just very lucky to give them a gift card for their time. And again, obviously any of them were doing this for the money. It was really just their way of kind of helping out two young founders who wanted to learn more about their industry. So we're very grateful.
That's amazing. So talk to me about Charta's growth. You started in kind of stealth mode and then you guys went live. Talk to me about that journey.
Yeah, so it certainly has been a crazy year and a half for us since we ultimately picked an idea. And so for us, I think picking an idea to ultimately go on this journey, even as recently as spring of last year, we still had three or four ideas. We were seriously considering building into what we'd hope to become our venture scale company, and we're not ready to commit to anything. And ultimately didn't finally pick an idea and come out of stealth until last summer. And, it's really almost cheating in a sense. By the time we came out of stealth, we had already validated a lot of things. We had discarded what we thought were still going to be great ideas. By the way, all of those three or four ideas and many more of them all have several venture-backed companies working on those ideas. And I have no doubt many of them will become multi-billion-dollar companies. So we have no idea if we picked the right one, but tried to validate in every way possible what we thought would give us the best shot. And so, yeah, so a lot of this work, I think, happened really upfront and enabled our growth by the time we actually went to market. We really raised our first major round of funding really earlier this year and then kind of raised back-to-back rounds. Saw a lot of growth really, really quickly early. And so ended up raising these back-to-back rounds for about 30 million in capital from, our partners at Bain Capital. And so, yeah, lots happened this year. I think some of our first clients have really gone live really within the last year or two. And, to think that those are now some of our oldest customers when we're one of their newest vendors, especially in a world like healthcare is, yeah, we're very lucky to be here, especially our current stage, to be one of the fastest growing companies even still today. And healthcare, I think, is certainly something we don't take for granted.
That's amazing. That's congratulations. That's absolutely amazing. I love stories like that. And I'm very curious about your company culture because you started as a software engineer at Google. Google famously has incredible offices. I'm sure you can tell me tons of stories, and my job would be on the floor. We've had some people who started their careers at Google too, or were there for long times, and it's amazing what you all got to experience there. How has that influenced your company culture at Charta?
A lot of being at Google and how that influenced me, I think, was really getting to see what the bar could really look like for tech talent, culture. I think Google, more than anything else, really, I think, built its original reputation, at least in the Silicon Valley, on having a very technical first, engineering centric culture where they famously, for example, like try to like hide people's titles. They want everything to be merit based in the room. They want, especially in engineering, this is easier, I think, than other departments where everything is idea and merit based and it's not who the idea comes from, but the ability to kind of voice your ideas strongly, disagree with other people openly, but also be open minded enough to listen to other people's ideas. These are some of the things that ended up shaping a lot of the culture that, at least when Scott and I started this company together, still are true for us today. I can't say our offices look anything as nice as Google was.
Not yet.
Not yet. One day, I'm sure their lunch budget is worth many more times than the funding we've ever been able to raise. But yeah, no, I think there's certainly a lot to learn there, and I think especially for someone who grew up in the Bay, it was really nice getting to see what that culture was like. Now, when we recruit people, of course, a lot of engineers have had stints, if not currently, kind of experiences at companies like Google, or now there's a whole host of big tech companies, even mid to large size tech companies that have all kind of made their name and are all influenced by similar set of cultures and allows us to relate to them in a way that's not just having a startup mindset. So yeah, so I'm especially contrasting my Google experience with a really early stage experience at a company like Rockset afterwards has certainly, I think, like shaped the way that we think about company building and given us more empathy, I think, for different ways of seeing companies go through their building journeys.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I know you have an in-person company culture, which I know a lot of our both clients as well as partners and candidates ask us about. They're like, "Oh, what do the candidates think about in person?" They're all like, "Oh, does it matter? Are there, strong opinions on it? How does it influence compensation? How does it influence who you can access?" What has your experience been with wanting kind of talent to show up in person and hiring challenges or successes because of it?
It's funny you say that. I'm sure that's in all the recruiters that we work with, inside and outside. It certainly objectively makes recruiting harder. It's harder to recruit on average, at least on balance. Of course, if you're willing to be a remote company or even a hybrid company, everything is a lot easier. We're not the only company that is very serious about being 5 days a week in person these days. There's a whole wave of startups that are pretty serious about this, but the way I really think about it is it's not just about the market shrinking in a sense of like the pool of candidates we can go after. It's really, I think, like a self-selection pool where oftentimes there are a whole suite of candidates, myself included, where I like really want to work at a in-person company culture. And, if many people, including let's say most of my friends outside of work, don't, they're very happy to have the flexibility of being remote or hybrid. There may just not be a fit there. A lot of being in person, I think, to me, it's really more than just about work. That's really what people often misunderstand. There are certainly, I think, like pieces of being in person that founders or different culture operators will say increase productivity. And I think some of that is true, like if we can turn the TV off and keep this in person instead of on Zoom, the pace of conversations will be faster. Of course, everybody says at an early stage, you want to be able to tap somebody on the shoulder. Well studied, I think, well consensus there that there's benefits to that. There are really good arguments for the opposite as well. Like across the company, certain departments work a lot better. At home in a room, they can call by themselves, they can work on their own, they're not distracted, they can work their own hours. For all kinds of various roles, there's really good reasons why, from a productivity standpoint, you might argue it's better to be remote. For us, it's really about trying to find people who are not just here to be really serious about work, but really I think it's about the social aspects, the whole human aspects of coming in. And when we work at an early stage startup together, who knows if this is going to work out or not, as much as we are all really optimistic and, are very lucky to be a part of something we know is doing really well. In this journey, the amount of time that we spend together at a startup, we want to spend that time with people who we just frankly like to be around. We want to be able to be friends with the people that we work with. When I come to work, I don't want to just come to work because I'm excited about what the company can accomplish. I want to be excited about who I get to come to work and see every single day and work with and spend my time with. Everybody says you often spend much more time with your coworkers than you do with your significant others or family even. And you think so hard about who you choose in your family and friends of personality fits and trying to match all these important factors beyond your work or technical ability, but your kindness, your EQ, all these other things. I think like those are all things that we care about deeply here. What gets us really invested in our work goes beyond just the customer and just the problem we're solving. It's really, I think, like the people we get to work with. So I think that part is, at least for our company, really often misunderstood, highly underrated, a huge reason why I think makes all of us more invested in the work that we do.
Yeah, and it is very true. And we do spend way more time with our colleagues than we do with our friends outside of work. At Bet's company culture is everything. We literally had a conversation about this yesterday. One of my colleagues had the medical procedure. She had to take a day off, but one of our other colleagues also had to take the day off because she was her emergency contact and had to pick her up
Oh my God.
from the hospital. So two people were out. And that's how they know each other, through the company, to show how close they are, because they do get to work together in person as well. We're hybrid, so a little bit of best of both worlds for our New York office. But the in-person time is so appreciated, and people are so close. And they love hanging out together. We actually have our office holiday party tonight, which is very exciting. So a
It's
lot of
amazing.
people flew in, and we get to spend time together, as colleagues, but in large part also as friends and people who enjoy each other's company. So completely can relate to the feeling there. Although I'm surprised, from someone who comes from like a software engineering background, I don't think I would have guessed that would be your philosophy necessarily, because I know usually that's a lot of time spent behind a computer where you might not want to be distracted by the hustle and bustle of everyone around you. But that is very interesting.
I would also say I've heard really good arguments on the other side of the company too, where there are also a lot of roles outside of engineering. I think a lot of people think like, yeah, engineering makes sense. It feels like a very introverted kind of like you're in your own cubicle space role. And parts of that are true, but it's maybe even unfair also to go to market teams, right? Like salespeople, if they spend all day calling, oftentimes it's way easier to call from the comfort of your home. You don't have to be around other people. I've heard other roles like HR, recruiting, talent. You don't have to be always cross-functional. And there's certainly roles where it makes really a lot of sense to be at home. Of course, I think there are really good productivity counter arguments in both ways. But yeah, no, ultimately, it's just too complicated for me. Really, if I'm just being honest, I just want to come and hang out with my coworkers and friends. And every single day, those are the people I want to be around. And so that's ultimately what drives our in person culture here.
Yeah, and I mean, to add to the conversation, and this is something we talk about a lot as well, as like at networking things, is when I was starting out in my career, I think I was lucky to be in person. This was pre-COVID, right? In person was the norm, that there was no option really of not being in person. And I learned so much from just being in an open office and hearing the other departments do their jobs, hearing the sales calls happen, and hearing kind of the challenging questions and the things they were discussing, and hearing the SDRs. I think I learned so much from my colleagues in different departments. And it's even a huge reason, I think, why at Bets, part of the sales, like the SDR team, rolls up into marketing. And the reason we can have that happen is because I was so involved with sales throughout my career because of being around sales so much, that you naturally just kind of join in and have an opinion and start to be a part of it. We even had a company wide cold calling day. Every single department joined in and we all sat there together. It was super fun. So lots of perk, especially when you're more junior, to being in person and learning from each other, besides also the wonderful social aspects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really cool. All right. Lots more questions. So, curious, when it comes to hiring in person, And specifically when it comes to hiring kind of the go-to-market roles. What's Charta's approach to the compensation questions? Because you guys are a very young company, right? You can't compete with Google or how much Google offers, but you guys get amazing talent too. So what's your approach there?
For most roles at the company, when you think about cash compensation, at least, it's actually objectively, to your point, pretty impossible to compete. I mean, forget Google these days with these AI companies paying these absurd packages. At some level, the best talent will always take some kind of a pay cut to be at a startup rather than there where they theoretically could work. But I think in a funny way, when we think about go to market roles, especially on the sales side, where the variable side of your compensation becomes more and more tied to the outcomes of the company, I often find, for example, people who in sales who actually want to join an early stage company because it feels like their ceiling is higher, where the company still has, there's much higher variance in, your highest performing rep to your lowest performing rep than compared to like Google or Salesforce on those sales teams where the motion is much more figured out and routine, and it feels almost like you're more capped and it's very process driven sales. But when we think about compensation here, what I really tell candidates is the reality of my role at the company, which I think people often don't really think about or realize from a founder CEO perspective. My job at the company, in very simple terms, is basically to take venture capital dollars and output ARR. That is basically my whole job. And theoretically, everything that we do, whether it's engineering or sales or even culture building, HR, everything else is a means to an end for ARR. It could be short term, it has to be medium and long term sustainable, but that's really all it comes down to. And so, as conservative a spender we can be about allocating those dollars for most parts of the company when it comes to a cost center, because we have a limited amount of dollars to kind of give out, I often say, like, quite literally, the most highly leveraged way that I can allocate those venture capital dollars out of any place I spend in the whole company is literally in the commission that we pay to our sales team. Every single dollar that our sales team gets paid in commission is more dollars in AR that the company is making. And you can see what the numbers look like. I mean, like, people rate a bunch of money in venture capital dollars. They're just trying to figure out how to get some number of millions of AR here. If you could spend that all on sales commission, you would be a fantastic, like the world's fastest growing company. That's like quite literally how the math works out. And so when we talk about sales compensation here, what every single salesperson I've interviewed and chatted with about joining a company like Charta will really want these salespeople to understand is our goal here is to build a team where you should feel like you are in the opportunity of your lifetime to make as many dollars as you will ever be able to make in a role like this. And let's be honest, I mean, compensation is a huge part of not just anybody's package, but especially in sales. The best salespeople, you'd be lying if you say compensation is, if not the number one, the number two driver. I mean, like, it's a huge part of, especially successful salespeople. I mean, frankly, like, I don't know if I trust a salesperson who said they didn't care about money. It's a huge part of the role and the incentive structure. And so that's really what I want people to believe. I really want them to feel like you want to make $1 million cash in your role. You could do that here. We will never cap sales commissions. We will not. We'll give you every possible opportunity to make that dollar. You should come and prove to us and everybody else that our comp structure is broken. One day the quotas will be adjusted accordingly, but you will be the one who kind of paves that path for us, not only in the short term for us to make a lot of money for the company this year, which of course would be already highly leveraged for us. But what we really want to build here is I want to frankly be able to go around and parade your sales compensation package when you've made your millions of dollars to go hire the next best sales talent at the next role. How else can we attract the best talent to leave their cushy sales jobs where they're already making millions of dollars to come and work at Charta? The way that we do that is by parading around your success. And so ultimately, every single person I think that we look to hire here from a compensation standpoint, it's the one area everybody at the company will hear from my perspective. We will never be shy about paying. We will always have extremely aggressive accelerator packages. I mean, I think, again, all the incentives are aligned here for sales to be leading the company.
I love it. And anyone listening who's like, I want to work at Charta, please hire me. We will help you. We'll get you in front of we'll get you in front of Justin and the team because that sounds incredibly appealing. I love that. And that obviously makes hiring for you a lot easier than it would be otherwise. But yeah, if you're listening, reach out to us and let us know. I
Absolutely.
know we're almost out of time. One question I really want to ask, and I love asking founders like yourself, what's something that really surprised you about being a CEO versus an employee at a company?
It's a good question. I think one of the biggest differences between it's being a founder CEO and being somebody who works in another person's company is I think really understanding your relationship with work. That's probably the starkest difference. A lot of people look at founders and it feels crazy that, the number of hours that founders put in and feels like they have to put in, even though they don't necessarily have a boss making them do it. And it's the amount of stress that comes with being a founder that everybody talks about, how you get to feel those feelings and why it just matters so much to you. When you work at somebody else's company, even if you're an early person, you get more and more of this, of course, the earlier you go. But I think ultimately, when you are not the founder and founder CEO of a company, I think the biggest difference is it always feels like there's somebody else who cares more than you. When something comes in, a deal doesn't work out, when a company, maybe a customer is really unhappy, maybe they churn, maybe a competitor puts out something that's really nasty about you. I think, you might not like it, you might be stressed, but you always feel like somebody else will care more. When you're the founder and CEO, that's not true. You don't have anybody else to kind of fall back on. It really does feel like the whole world falls on your shoulders. And not only that, it feels like everybody else is looking at you for answers. And yeah, oftentimes I don't feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. It's certainly my goal to surround myself with everybody at the company who's more capable than I am. But there are certain situations when things are starting to fall apart, everybody looks at me for answers when I certainly don't feel like I'm necessarily the most qualified person in the room to answer these questions. But yeah, I think that's really, I think the difference, I think, in being a CEO, everything kind of falls on your shoulders. And if it's not part of somebody else's role explicitly, by default, you are the responsible one. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest difference in what I've learned, especially as a first time founder.
That's so interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about that. Did you, Nikki? Like the fact that you're going to be the one that always cares the most. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, I think everybody deals with imposter syndrome at different degrees. And to put yourself in the perspective of being a CEO and having all that responsibility on you, it's definitely sounds like there's a lot of pressure. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that much. That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, that's a really interesting answer. Wow. Okay. Well, we're about out of time. So the last thing I'm going to say is if someone wants to reach out to you, Justin, and say, for $100 gift card, can I have some of your time? Uh, would you recommend they drop a message in your LinkedIn DMs? How should they reach out to you?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on my LinkedIn. You can guess my email. It's my first name at chartahealth.com. It's not hidden from anybody. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. It's only my way of paying it back to all the people who made it possible for us.
Yeah, so definitely reach out to Justin and $100 gift card for what is it, 30 minutes of your time so that they can learn
I'll
more
take it,
about the healthcare.
You can keep the
I
gift
love
card,
it.
maybe.
I mean, it's nice. Thank you so much for coming on, Justin. This was absolutely amazing. I learned so much from you. I really appreciate your time and I hope everyone enjoyed listening. So thank you, everyone. This was Beyond the Hire podcast and thank you for listening.